Losing someone we care about either through death or distance can be hard to deal with. So here with some advice for grieving a loss, please welcome back Dr. and author Michael Friedrichs. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
I guess the first thing, if you're suffering from some kind of loss, you have to recognize that you're grieving. Some people may not even recognize the symptoms. So let's walk through those quickly.
That's right. Well, first let me say that I brought a special guest. This is my father-in-law. This is Cynthia's father.
Is that true?
Really?
Yeah, he was big into showbiz, so I figured that
he gets to be front and center.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So
okay, now you joked when you sat down. And you said I brought some chocolates.
well, I figured you wouldn't let me bring a dead body in here, so I had to be. There he is.
Oh my goodness!
Well,
no,
actually,
there are no chocolates in there.
It's a goodly portion of him.
Yeah.
We left part of him in Scotland.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
No, grief, the study of grief is called thanatology. It was a major focus of my dissertation, so I know a lot about it. Grief happens anytime we lose a significant loved one, and it's often accompanied by withdrawal symptoms, which are typical of extreme emotions, for example, or physiological responses like sleeplessness. In particular, intrusive thoughts, where you just kind of get seized by a thought of somebody. Sometimes there's strange behaviors, and even religious reevaluation is typical. The important thing to know about grief is that it's a normal process. It's not a dysfunction or a disorder. It's a normal process, and it has a beginning and an end if you do the work.
Now, is it connected? Can you call it depression as well, or?
Absolutely not. We want to be very careful not to mix the two, and I noticed that a lot of medical practitioners do that. Prozac does not work on grief. In fact, it actually hurts the grief
Yeah,
process.
we think it doesn't allow you to feel.
That's correct. Typically what we see when what you're talking about, it would be a complicated grief. This is like Hollywood gets really excited about this when they depict someone dies and don't touch their things or don't go in the room ever, you know, that sort of thing we don't expect to happen in grief. A person should move through grief, and complicated grief happens when you get depression laid on top of a normal grieving process. And the problem is that, to put it simply, the remedy for depression is distraction. Go do something fun. The remedy for grief is to face
the grief.
So am I hearing that the complicated factors, the depression on top of it, is because someone hasn't gone through the proper grieving process?
That's correct. And that's what things like alcohol can interrupt.
All right. Well, before we ban alcohol, let's just find some other things we can do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the steps to deal with grief. What should people recognize and do?
Well, we talk about grief work, and grief work is the set of behaviors that people engage in order to free up the energy that they had invested in the idea of a living person. So in other words, it's how we psychologically detach from the deceased. And you may have heard of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model, which follows in every way a physiological process. Say you cut your finger, first thing you do is you cover it, which is denial, right? You've heard this.
Right.
And then you look at it and you go, oh, you might say things you can't say on TV.
Right.
That's the anger phase. The bargaining, the car ride to the hospital, oh, let this not be as bad as I think it is.
Right.
And then finally the doctor says, I'll sew your finger back on, but you'll never play violin again, followed by sadness and eventually adjustment to the new life. Now, what's important to know is that people don't usually follow all of those stages, or even in some of them. So the biggest factors are culture and the relationship that you had with the person who died.
So what can we do if someone loses, let's say, loses her husband?
Right.
What can we do? What can we say to help them? And what do we not say, for goodness sakes?
Absolutely. The first thing is things that you don't want to do, the things you want to avoid. I think what drives this, and I've talked to many, many people who've lost people, I think what drives this is that none of us are comfortable with the idea of death. So we try to say something stupid to make it go away, to make the pain stop. That's not a time to do that. So don't say something like, he's in a better place.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think Al would agree that's probably not a better place.
Right.
And that has to do with the person's religious beliefs. Don't say it's part of God's plan. That's a really dumb thing to say to somebody. It's generally hurtful. Your child was young. You can still make another. I've heard people say things like that. So what you want to do is realize that when someone that you know has lost somebody, it's really their time to be bridezilla. That's the first thing. You know, that's whole never get between an Italian widow and a casket. You know, give that person some space. Make yourself available and be a good listener. That's definitely what you want to do. You want to say, how did you feel? And do use the word died, by the way. I hear people use a lot of euphemisms. They tip to, he's sleeping now. No, you know, you're not going to shock the person by using the D word.
And what I'm hearing you say is we can't say anything that mitigates the loss.
That is correct, and stop trying.
And take it away. So we have to be supportive somehow.
And be willing to hear the wave of sadness that you might get. But more importantly, be a good friend. Offer your help. offer to pick up the pets, pick up the children, whatever.
So just regular chores that you wouldn't...
Casseroles,
Right.
driving, especially right after death. People drive kind of recklessly. You want to be careful. You want to remember the first anniversary. Be sure that phone, because grief in the United States usually takes about 2 years. So you want to get that first anniversary, and good friends will write down that date and be sure to call that person that day and follow up.
What about if you think you may be, or not know? How do you recognize in yourself that you're maybe grieving? Because my family, very stoic about these sort of things, and probably don't handle it properly. How do people know?
Well, again, properly is determined by the person and the culture. Look, in Sioux culture, remember Dances with Wolves, that woman was cutting herself with a dagger. That's because in Native American Sioux culture, at least, you had 1 week to get over to the deceased, and then you were never allowed to mention their name again on a fear that you would bring the soul into the village.
Wow.
Compare that to, example, the Middle Eastern grieving, or Queen Victoria, who made a culture out of grieving her entire life, or an Irish wake versus Jewish Shiva, which is a very serious occurrence. So it really depends on that person's culture. So you say you come from a stoic family, I mean, it may not be a problem the way they're dealing with it.
Yeah, gotcha.
But drinking, look out for drinking and drugs.
Please don't ban drinking. All right, very good. All good tips, and humor is important too.
It is very important. I think Al would have approved.
All right, thanks so much for coming in today.
Doctor.